Welcome to Broadcast Astrology, Insight for Humans.
This is Lisa Pesnichek.
And I'm Sara Beckner, and we're here to deep dive into the fascinating world of astrology.
We offer blind chart readings, interviews with notable guests, and much more.
So keep listening as we bring you Insight for Humans.
Hello, and welcome to Broadcast Astrology, Insight for Humans. Today, we're doing another live chart reading. We have Amy here with us today. And because I've worked with Amy's chart previously, we've decided to do some timing techniques, providing Amy with some insight for what the year ahead looks like. Predominantly are looking at her solar return. We'll also use what's called the Graphic Ephemeris, looking at timing, as well as just regular transits. So where I usually begin, which is secondary progressed lunar phase, which is basically a long-term version of the relationship between the sun and a moon in people's charts, runs on the background. And Amy is currently in what's called the new moon phase. And Amy, I'm sure I think we spoke to this last time we talked. When you're in a new moon phase, you're in a point where you're planting new seeds. You've broken everything down in the balsamic phase. She had her balsamic phase from 2020 to 2024. And then from early 2024 until mid 2027, she's going to be in this new moon phase, which compared to the balsamic phase actually feels a little bit more actionable because you're able to start putting the pieces in place for what your future's looking like. This doesn't necessarily mean that you're not doing things on the outside world, but it's more of an inner process of developing what your future looks like going forward. And do you want to talk about where that took place, Sara?
Yeah, it's one of the first things I looked at when I looked at your chart, Amy, because you have both your progressed sun and moon in the sign of Leo. And in your natal chart, you have Neptune in the first house, which can often be a chart signature, almost like not being really recognized in your family or seen for what you have to offer. And you came into this world with a Gemini sun, which is more about this kind of cerebral intellectual orientation. And then your sun moved into Cancer, which brought a lot of thematic things around family and loyalty to the family. And it's a water sign, so it's much more emotional territory. And you're somebody who already has a strong family signature in your chart and suggests there's a lot of learning and lessons around family and how you relate to the family and your role in the family. And then some years ago, 6-7 years ago, your progressed sun went into Leo. And there's this strong shift in your chart now about your own shining your own light and your own self-expression and moving into this period of life. Your sun will be in Leo for the next 23 years. And so this is a big chapter of your life that is really about you expressing yourself in all facets, like bringing your personality and your individuality into everything you do, bringing it into your work, bringing it into places where it can be seen and recognized and affirmed. And so there's something about the fact that you're getting this from both the sun and moon right now that's really emphasizing that Leo energy. This is your time to shine. And at the same time, you have really strong developmental signatures right now that I'm just looking forward to getting into your life and knowing what your experience is, because I think a lot is changing for you. And it's not going to happen on a dime, but you're in this period of several years where I don't think you're going to come out on the other side looking the same. And we didn't talk about the Chiron return, Lisa, but I just glanced down as you were talking. I was like, oh yeah, she's coming upon her Chiron return. But I think we can hold on to this idea that whatever we share with you in the coming hour, at the end of the day, this is about you coming in more into yourself during this period of time.
Beautiful.
Do you feel that at work in your life?
Yes. In pretty much all aspects of day-to-day life. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So do you want to look at the previous solar return first? Yeah, if you want to start speaking to it.
Okay. So, every year from your birthday to the following birthday, It's what we call a solar return year. And we use that chart as a predictive chart for that period of time. And within that period of time, there are always, when we look at the chart, it looks like a pie separated into different pieces that rule different areas of your life. And every year, there are a couple areas that rise in prominence in terms of what you're going to be dealing with during that time. And your birthday last summer, what was rising is the theme of family. So again, you already are somebody who has a strong family signature. You are located in the house of family of origin within your birth chart, saying that there's a lot about the people you come from and your place in the family that you're working with in this life. But now, during this particular year, which you have just a few more months of, it's really like putting those things right front and center. The seventh house that was rising. And seventh house rising can bring up topics of partnership, which you are also getting, like we see this reiterated again in lots of different places, lots of different timing techniques. But there's something happening in relationship that's really potent for you this year in a way that is likely not comfortable for you. And so it's reworking a lot of areas of your life, family, partnership. At the same time, we see you have both Saturn and Neptune on the ascendant in the solar return chart. Saturn can bring feelings of responsibility and challenge and delays and obstacles. It can make it feel like you're having a hard time making headway, that you're bearing some responsibility, that things feel like a burden, that you're under it. The monkey's on your back. And at the same time, Neptune's there. And so for the course of this, the duration of this year, there can just be a sense of something needs to give. It can be a year of a lot of overwhelm, a year of potential loss and disappointment, a year of really needing to envision things in a new way. It's a deeply sensitive and feeling placement, which is where I think a lot of the overwhelm can come from, just because it can make you feel a little bit more porous and permeable and affected by your environment, your relationships, the people in your life, that you're just going to be more sensitive to all of it. Something about this signature made me feel like there was some level of letting go that needs to happen. And that's not necessarily going to be easy for you, but it's what needs to happen for your long-term gain. When Saturn's involved, usually we do the hard work for our future selves. Because you've lived into this chart since this summer, do you resonate with any of those themes? Are there places where you feel a lack of clarity or overwhelm, or where this year is, you're having a hard time gaining traction, or it feels like a lot of work?
Yes. I feel like day-to-day life is just different now. With helping my parents with their health, my kids being older, my business taking the route that it is, just figuring that new kind of flow out, and then not really knowing what each day is going to bring. That is a new thing for me to be figuring out.
I don't know the state of your parents' health, but I wondered if this Neptune was not a sign of you feeling as if they're slipping away. Not necessarily a literal loss of a parent this year, but just that feeling of the dynamic of you're losing them in some capacity.
Mhm. Definitely, yeah. So my dad has Alzheimer's. So it's him both health-wise slipping away, but then also him as my dad kind of slipping away. That's been a lot to wrap my head around, definitely. And then being in the mom role of the family instead of my mom being the mom role of the family. That has been an adjustment this year as well.
And how is your
Yeah.
mom doing?
She's good. She is much more open for help, which has been amazing.
Good.
But we keep reminding ourselves that her birthday's coming up and she's going to be 80 and
Mm.
she's still with it. plugging along, but she's also 80. So, yeah.
A big change. And that the Saturn there too, Sarah mentioned feeling of the family structure that you knew, as well as your father disintegrating, and that being something that's you're really dealing with head on, but also the responsibility that you bear along with that, which is also echoed very strongly, as Sarah noted, in your natal chart as well.
Yeah. And it's just like a new day to day life for all of us so that we're just organizing things every day and making sure little things like the garbage is taken out or the medical stuff is being handled.
Mm.
Speak to just changes within the family unit in general, just with the
Mhm.
fourth house rising this year.
Mhm.
And you can also see your mother in the solar return chart is also connected to a planet that's associated with some sense of loss or grief. Maybe that reflects her living with watching her life partner.
I'm very lucky that we have the family unit that we have, and we're able to really step up and help each other in any way that needs to happen.
Mhm.
You do have some really beautiful things in your chart that speak to your family of origin. Your parents are sitting right next to each other in the chart, in your natal chart.
Mhm.
You want to point that out, Lisa?
Oh, yeah.
The Sun, Saturn. And then you also have part of fortune, which is a place that we associate with abundance and resources sitting right on the line that indicates your family. And so I do think that speaks to blessing as you go through this part of it, which can be so difficult, is you have a solid family.
Mhm.
I do. And I'm so grateful for that. So grateful.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And it's nice that we've all kind of been able to be open in that and lean on each other and know today's really rough because of this, or today's really great because of this. And we're able to support each other through it, which
Mhm.
is nice.
Beautiful. And so your siblings are also still stepping in and
Mhm.
all that.
My brother has moved here now. He's
Oh,
actually
wow.
living with them, which is amazing.
That is
Amazing. So that not only gives like another, my dad tends to respond to male
amazing.
energy. Um, so it's helped that way, but it's also given my mom a level of support
Oh,
that I think
huge.
she really needed.
Yeah.
So somebody else seeing what's happening every day. And it's not just her having to explain it to people.
Mhm.
So that's been a huge help. Huge.
And then is that giving you more space to focus on your career and your business as well?
Definitely. Yeah.
Is that what you're seeing in the coming year, Lisa? Do you want to pull up the next?
Sure. Is there anything else you want to point out about this chart before I take it down? I
I
remember
mean,
because relationships were also highlighted here. Has there been any updates about, let's see, what it could just because we do have such a strong connection. And one thing that I'm seeing here, which I also remember seeing several times in the next solar return chart, is this connection between your partner and your family. And I had some speculation as far as what that might be pointing towards for the next year, but it's been a little while since I looked at the 2024, your current one that you're almost at the end of. But is there a connection there? Have things changed within your relationships? You don't have to go into too much detail if you don't want to.
It can be a struggle, difficult.
Yeah, and in the upcoming the 2025 solar return, it looks like whatever friction is there might be heightening and becoming a bigger deal that you are actually going to have to address.
And like, yeah, that's happening. Yes.
okay,
Like, yeah.
it's definitely a caution with regard to relationship this year and a caution with your ability to potentially not see it for what it is.
Mhm.
Relationship is connected with a planet that can go into some level of fantasy or misguided optimism about the potential there within that relationship.
Mhm.
And so clear discernment for you to really seek clarity in relationship. And you may want to keep alcohol out of the question. I don't know if it's an issue with your partner, but you really need clarity. And then, Lisa, look, there's the South Node in the
Yeah, I know. I was like,
toxic relationship this year. That's one of the indications of loss or that you're losing some n- grounding or traction of the relationship. It can be potential for separation if it shows up in multiple ways.
and also
Um,
because of that, you're finding that you have to lean on yourself more and you have to
mhm.
come into yourself and focus more on what Sarah opened with, which is your self development and really standing further in who you are. So whether that ends up being something that has a conclusion to it, or if it continues to be an ongoing process, that's a dynamic that's happening.
What's interesting is that when we look at her in the chart this year, there are positive Pluto aspects in the natal and
Really
solar
nice.
return. So, Amy, this suggests that this is a year of you really becoming more empowered in some way and coming into greater levels of personal power, authority, and autonomy in your own self. It's a really positive chart signature for transformation and taking control.
Mhm. Yeah, and the
And I
empowerment,
feel
it's something that feels naturally available to you.
that's funny. I was just going to say that same thing with Sarah, what you were saying when we opened. That's how I feel in this aspect of life right now. It's like empowering or clarity or just being honest, maybe, or open to what's happening instead of trying to make it something that it's not.
Mhm. Yeah, I think
But
that's a big theme for this year, and I think that in some ways the Saturn rising kind of taking what this Neptune has to say and almost dispelling the illusion of the Neptune, where Neptune can create unrealistic expectations. And the Saturn there is like, no, you need to look at what's really there and empowering you to navigate through the illusions or the misconceptions or the stories that the world around you may have told you. And you have feeling like you have the authority to say, no, this is what I actually think. This is what I actually feel. Instead of feeling like you have to placate and getting entangled, which is very much part of your natal story as well, is getting entangled into the ways you feel obliged to show up for people and putting some sort of a boundary on that.
Mhm.
And basically, everything we just said relates to your work as well, because in this solar return chart, the planet that represents you also represents your career. And so, all those themes of empowerment and coming into greater authority and taking more control, and it really supports leadership in work or executive function, taking charge, making decisions. And at the same time, not making unnecessary sacrifices like that Neptune or getting led astray or the potential for doubt. Sometimes that Neptune can make things a little bit murky, but you are getting a really strong positive developmental push to come into yourself and work as well.
Yeah, and the
It's like
placement.
I have a better sense of my gut, if that
Yeah,
makes sense. When I have a strong sense of something, if I really focus on that and believe it, ends up turning out the way that I thought it would, or I'm confident about. That makes sense.
yeah, absolutely. And I think part of this too is a lot of so this Jupiter is ruling the both your ascendant and your MC, which is your career point. So this is you, this is your career. You're both sharing the same significator this year. And it's in the second house, which can be financial, right? You're gaining, you're building both who you are and your career in order to gain more financial stability underneath you. But also, I think it has to do with your self worth and you recognizing your talents for what they are. And with Uranus here as well, there's some way that you're being liberated from what we see in your natal chart, which is where you're so tied into what everybody else expects of you. So there's almost like this liberation happening where you're like, I have these talents, I have these inherent talents that have to do also with my self identity and my career path and my success. And almost this blasting away of the ties on some level, and probably not all of them. You'll probably never be free of all of them. It's a really, we all have things that we just are constantly working on, but this is a big step for you, I think, this year as part of that as well. All right. So, do we want to move to? Do you have any more comments about this year, Amy, or anything else that you might want to add that we haven't picked up on in this brief interpretation of the solar return chart that you think that would be interesting to bring to our attention?
Not right now. Not right now.
Okay. If anything comes up, let us know.
Okay.
And we will move over to this year's chart. And so this year, here's the solar return here, and here's the natal. And let me bring up my notes for this year. And Amy, there's this huge emphasis this year, which is really interesting because this last year, the one that you're still in up until your birthday, technically, but you'll probably start to feel it like April, May. But this year, there's a huge eighth house emphasis, which last year or this year that you're currently in was self-development, finding your self-purpose, and becoming independent of a lot of the things that we were speaking to. But it almost looks like it's in preparation for you to enter back into the eighth house. And the eighth house is psychological, but also the ways that we're tied to other people. That can be tangibly through finances or resources, but it can also be psychological as well, where we feel like we're indebted to other people to show up in a certain way or to give a certain amount of energy to them in whatever form that looks like. And it can also point towards death quite blatantly and losing people in your life, as well as inheritance. And it's also like in your chart as well, it has to do with other people's money. And you're an accountant, which I think we've spoken to before, and your career marker is in the eighth house in your natal chart, which says that you deal with other people's money, which is very textbook. This person's an accountant. Amazing. But I think this year we also see there's a lot of ties, not just between you and the eighth house, but also between your family and the eighth house. And that there's something within your family that there's the potential, and I'm not trying to predict the loss of anybody in your family by any means, but just this theme kept coming up. A- And so there is the potential of that being something that you're either dealing with on a more tangible level than you were this year. And maybe that just has to do with you and your siblings working out on a finer level, like your parents will, and where the money's going to, and that sort of thing. Because there's also a really strong connection in this chart between the siblings and the family. So that's really super wide lens of what was coming up for me. And everything kept coming back to that eighth house. And it could also be that you're making investments in things. These things can be multi-layered. Maybe you do gain some money from investments, or you put some investments even into your business or that sort of thing. And that could be another way that this is playing out. Sarah?
I before you even spoke, Lisa, just when you put it up, because I hadn't seen it before, My mind did go to some level of loss. And again, it doesn't have to be literal, but when the eighth house rises, there can be some level of anguish because I just saw that south node on her IC.
Mhm.
I think that there's going to be, in terms of the family story, again, it doesn't have to be literal loss, but I do think it's going to be a page turner in the sense that together you're all going to navigate something that leaves things irrevocably changed. Yeah, usually these years are bring some level of surrender or letting go or having to grieve some of that. And whether you're just still grappling with this stage of life, what they're in, but there does seem to be some grief in it. And yeah, like Lisa said, you actually seem like the siblings seem very present in that. And at the same time, look, Lisa, everything she has in the 10th house.
I know.
At the same time, you're like emerging more as an
Mhm.
individual in terms of work. And it seems like there's a lot of activity around that and something that you're going to feel some um, desire to push into new territory and keep growing things and moving forward.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel like me and my siblings, our bond has definitely changed this
mhm.
past year, 2 years or so into just a different type of relationship. Like it's deeper for sure because we all are seeing how our family's changing and how we can each help in our way to complement each other.
Yeah, they definitely continually kept showing up together. And it does, in this chart, we see the siblings in a place where they're dealing with loss as well. But it's interesting because you in this chart, just looking at the solar return on its own, you're in your fifth house of romance and children and creativity and individuation of who you are and taking the talents that we spoke to in the second house and bringing them into some level of manifestation, which is quite nice. But it does look like there's this wide opposition to Uranus from where you're located in this chart, which states that there's some tension, there's some unpredictability that you're working with in this place as well. And that Uranus came up several times. Sometimes it's interesting when you're doing these delineations because you're like, oh, that looks good from that planet. Now that looks bad from that planet. And to balance that out and figure out what is the real story. And I think Uranus's consistent message here is that there's going to be sudden changes within the family structure for you this year. And we see this when we take this chart to what we call the dial to get a more finer tuned picture of things. The family is definitely in a place of hardships and separation. And whether it's literal or just an emotional process that you're going through, it does look like you guys are up for some tough decisions. It's good that you had this past year to really consolidate and figure out what your priorities are because it looks like this next year you're really going to need the resources and the skills that you've built previously in order to handle some of the challenges that you'll be embedded in this coming year. But you guys know that. So it's not any surprise. It's not like, surprise, you're going to be coming up against some real hardships within your family.
There's some relationship stuff too. The partner is in opposition to
Mhm.
Pluto. And so there, themes around control dynamics, power dynamics within relationship,
Mm.
but and a potential lack of clarity about the relationship or potential disappointment or loss.
Yeah, when you have the significator for relationship in a hard aspect, specifically in opposition to Pluto, you have what our teacher would call a threshold experience. In order for the relationship to move forward, something has to be sacrificed. Maybe it's the relationship altogether, or maybe it's just a core element of the relationship that's not going to work anymore. And I wonder if the events that are happening in your family cause you to just be like, that's enough. I cannot put up with this anymore. And I wonder too if your family is going to be putting pressure on you to do that as well, because there's a lot of tension between your family and your partner in this chart, where your family's like, that's enough, Amy.
It can bring a clarifying of values.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, identifying where the failure is in the relationship. Where are the elements that aren't working anymore? And like Sarah said, a clarification of what does that mean?
And that's the clarity that I have been experiencing lately.
Yeah, and I
Definitely.
wonder if you're just not going to have enough patience for it anymore.
Yeah, because I don't wanna have to choose anymore. And that's how I have felt.
Hmm.
Mhm.
There's a lot in your chart that really speaks to your sense of loyalty. All of the predominant angles in your chart are fixed, meaning there's just something really loyal and also really willing to perhaps endure. I don't know if you feel slow to make changes, and you have a lot of Cancerian planets that's kind of tribal, feeling responsible and connected to the people that you've actually let in.
Mhm. Mhm. Definitely. Yeah, I feel that with everybody, family, friends, relationships at work. Like, I value that trust that people put in me, and I don't take it lightly. I feel responsible for that once I take that on.
And I think there's something about the way you're wired. That's how you inherently find meaning in life. A lot of your purpose and meaning making is around those deep connections. You're not a superficial person. You go deep. And in terms of transits, the few notes I made really speak to what you're saying, the need to confront issues of trust, loyalty, and intimacy as you assess your own need to grow and open up to opportunities. And that takes a lot of self-awareness, but you're in that place really through December of 2026. That's going to keep coming up. That will be the core. There are these little superficial things we encounter in life, but underlying it, there's going to be that core of evaluating who's worthy of your trust, who do you really need to be loyal to, including yourself.
Mhm. And being confident about them. That's what I've noticed lately as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm seeing that, Lisa, from that Pluto quincunx Venus in terms of her needing to reassess values around trust, loyalty, and intimacy.
Hmm.
And at the same time, we have Saturn squaring the sun, Saturn, and squaring the planet of relationship and partner, suggesting that the universe is going to test you. Are you really ready? And you'll be given little opportunities or obstacles to test that confidence, because the confidence goes back to the progressed lunation. You are in a period of your life that you're opening up to this next level of confidence and being able to trust and assert and express yourself. But you're going to have to navigate these little hurdles where it's tested. And the chart suggests that if you do that, opportunities will come, because at the same time, Jupiter is transiting all of those planets, which represent your career, your family, your partner. And so everything about this tells me if you do the work, you will be rewarded. Jupiter is the benefic planet that brings abundance and opportunities and blessings. So you just have to navigate this period of time where keep putting one foot in front of the other and making the right choices, and ultimately choices that allow you authentic choices, choices that are true to you.
Mhm.
Yeah. I keep seeing this Saturn Neptune interaction, the 2024 solar return. We have Saturn and Neptune straddling the ascendant. And then in the 2025 solar return, we have Saturn and Neptune together, elevated in the chart in the 10th house. And I think that's good to pay attention to because, as Sarah said, you are going to have Saturn coming through and squaring all of this and Jupiter coming through. And that's going to be really nice. But at the same time, you're going to have Neptune also squaring the Venus. It's not going to be exact for probably another year or so, but it is going to be within 2 degrees this year. And you're going to have Saturn right there and Jupiter conjuncting pretty close to that as well. I believe that happens. Is that in?
I have March 2026 for when
It's exact. But this year, the middle of this year, you are going to feel the impact of that. And this theme could come back to relationships. Sometimes Neptune can bringing the fog in, but it can also be dispelling the fog. And when you have this Jupiter Saturn influence as well, it's bringing you into reality to come to terms with the way that you've been in the fog with your relationships. And I'm not saying that's necessarily going to be easy because the Neptune could also be pretty persistent with saying, come on, let's just surrender and be a martyr. And you feel like you have to take care of everybody. And the loyalty is really great until you aren't taking care of yourself anymore. So I feel like this is going to be an invitation to really work with the way that you are a martyr in your relationships, the way that you idealize your relationships, the ways that you've allowed people to take advantage of you or not be heard, which also plays in with all of the other stuff that we've been speaking to, where you're like, enough. Jupiter Saturn is a really strong signature. It's the signature in mundane or world astrology of changes in government. So the change in government within you changing distinctly around relationships. And it's all going to be interacting pretty closely to this Venus, close enough that you're going to feel it.
I was thinking, if you were looking for the silver lining on this difficult Saturn transit, it's really about building foundations for success.
Mm.
And on all of those areas with your work, with your family, within partnership, and facing fears and letting go of what hinders you, because Saturn is obstacles. And so a Saturn square is often a time of reassessment about what is holding you back and working on building those foundations of success.
And that Saturn is going to come sweeping through, and you're going to be having your third quarter Saturn square. It's all going to blend together, where part of you is going to really be doing some deep reassessment and also coming to terms with reality. And I keep seeing this Saturn bringing you into reality as well. So right now, you have Saturn applying to an exact square to your sun, which rules your 10th house of career, which can be you stepping up your career and creating more infrastructure and taking your career more seriously and bringing it to the next height, and also therefore bringing more responsibility onto you. Are you still building your business?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely at a point where I want to hire somebody.
Good.
So, yeah.
If and when you do, some of the partnership that we were looking at can also apply to business partnerships. What I would say is dial down the parts of you that are this is going to sound awful, that are very caring and nice. You know what I mean? Because you're still going
Mhm.
to be really caring and nice, but you don't want to be taken advantage of. And there are
Mhm.
some things in this solar return chart that point towards the potential of being taken advantage of by a partner. So really pull back, dig into your inner authoritarian, the buck
Yeah.
stops here kind of thing. Because if you allow for whoever you bring in, if you allow for there to be holes in that relationship where they're able to take advantage of you, there's signatures stating that could be a problem. Be very diligent with how you establish that relationship.
But she has the support of Saturn for establishing boundaries. And I agree with everything you said, Lisa, especially because natally, she has the ruler of the 7th and 12th house the same. That means
Yeah.
that actually your partnerships, romantic and otherwise, there could be a facet of these people that somehow they become a hidden enemy to your joy and your welfare. I think the medicine for that is to have good boundaries right up
Mhm.
front because you have support for that with the chart. But because once you let people in, like we talked about, that deep trust, deep loyalty, deep intimacy, once you let people in, it gets much harder to discern
Mhm.
what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was the 12th house association is really what I was speaking to as well, is just keep those boundaries tight. Because when you bring them in, you want it to work well and you want it to be something that supports you as well as your work.
Stay the authority. You
Yeah.
know? Stay
Remember, you're the
authority.
boss.
Don't get
Yes.
equilateral with people that you employ. I would keep it structured.
That's definitely something I'm learning this year. I can feel that.
Yes.
Me learning that right now. That is important. And I need to do that now.
Hmm.
And it's very apparent to me, like that feeling.
Yeah.
Which is different. It's a new thing for me to do and feel and know that's what needs to happen.
We'll enjoy it.
Yeah, it's I don't know, it's exciting, it scared me
Yes.
for sure because it's just so different, but not in a bad way.
You think about years ago when I first opened up a business 20 years ago, it's like my receptionist or something got me a cup that said Big Boss Lady. You need the cup. You need the Big Boss Lady cup.
Yeah, yes.
You do.
Things of that mindset.
If you look at our nodal axis,
Mhm.
the part of you is pushing into the role of the authority.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily going to be comfortable for you. It's not your comfort place. It is in your chart asking you, and it's the only earth in your chart. Earth is the element that's associated with the material world and karmic resources and practical step, what we do to secure ourselves in this life. And you don't have earth in your chart. Sometimes we try to overcompensate for that, or we try to find that through a partner or something. But you definitely have a push to grow into a place where you can manage practical details that do the things on the earth plane that secure your position in the world, that allow you to have some of that authority and to do what's best for yourself in the long range.
Yeah.
And I see that the dynamic between me and my mom, I see that has happened in the past maybe 6 months, and that before she was a little hesitant to let me step in and ask for help. But now I just do it. Like, okay, mom, this is what the situation is and this is how we're going to handle it. And then
Was your mom a powerful figure when you were growing up? Because your dad looks kind of cool and your mom looks more like she held the reins.
100%, absolutely. Yeah. And still does, but now she's more open and okay with me stepping into that kind of role
Hmm.
just for day-to-day stuff that happens. So that's helped me get more used to that boss mentality in a comfortable and secure setting in my family because I know no matter what happens, they're there.
It's
No.
a safe place to practice.
And it's really interesting because you have Moon Pluto in your chart, which is what Sarah was speaking to when she asked the question about your mom, which is a mother who has an intensity. She is the one who holds the power stick, basically, And there's a variety of different ways that she could do that. But it's also in your chart. I think it's interesting that you're learning to embody this part of your chart that you may have always given to your mother. Now, through this interaction with your mother, owning it for yourself and learning that this was always inside of me. And now I get to use this. And the transiting Pluto is trining this, which is fascinating that this is the time when you get to hold it in a way that feels most authentic to you.
And she also, Lisa, has Sun Mars or
Mhm.
Mars Sun. And so that's, like you said, that's the mom that's more of the fierce protector, sharp, making decisions, but that's also her. And then
Yeah.
that's all getting transited by Saturn saying, okay, you can mature into this, you can own this.
Yes.
It's just fascinating, Amy, for the
Yeah.
astrologers to geek out on when these things show up.
Because right
I love
now
that.
you have Saturn to your Mars, which I'm sure we spoke to before, but you have one passage on March 12th, 2025, but you're definitely feeling it now. I think today Saturn's actually at 18 degrees or something like that. You are holding your own authority. You're maturing in a way that you hadn't before. And we see that from different perspectives from both Saturn and Pluto in pretty remarkable ways.
We better take a look at the Graphic Ephemeris.
Yeah, let's do it.
Amy, I know you had questions about the health of your parents and about relationship and work. And there's interesting things here. I noticed, just starting with the mother, we see that the mom gets transits from Neptune and Saturn starting late March is the first Neptune hit. And then it hits again mid to late October. And then we see Saturn active from late May to late August. So both of those things could indicate periods of time where things become more heightened, where your mom is feeling more fatigued or more of a sense of loss or more challenges or obstacles with what's happening in her life. If we look at transits to the sun, which is the universal significator of father, there's a Uranus Pluto crossing. I think it's late April, end of April, early May.
But there is Jupiter and Pluto in April, which is actually really nice because that's your Sun MC, and that's really nice for your career as well. The Jupiter Pluto is really, if you're looking to find a time to do any kind of promotion work or take things a step further, this mid-April timeline could be quite good for that.
And then can you point out the places where Jupiter is hitting her Mars line?
Mhm.
Because those would also be beneficial for work.
Yeah, exactly. So we have this in May, the beginning of May, there's both Jupiter and Mars, which this April, May timeline, I think combined could be quite good.
Um,
Mid-August and in November, the beginning of November, you get Mars there as well, which gives that Jupiter contact a little bit more oomph, a little bit more drive. So whatever you're putting effort into can be manifested a little bit more easily. And then there's Uranus crossing the Sun MC line in end of June, beginning of July. It can have to do with your career. A lot of these symbols have many meetings, but this can also potentially be your father, as Sarah was speaking to. Which could be sudden developments with your father as well as potentially with your career.
Which those, I don't know if it's coincidence or not, but those match up with my mom's, like you're saying, with like hard times that my mom may have.
That's
And
really
even
interesting.
all of that. And
Even when we get down to your career as well. That is fascinating. You should be an astrologer, Amy.
That will be my next hat that I put on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You might want to write down those general times for when there could just be heightened activity around family, around career, that sort of thing. Let us know what happens, because
Mhm.
I always like to hear what aligns with people and what doesn't.
Do you have any questions for us, Amy?
One that's popping into my head right now is my mom's health.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
I'm so focused on my dad. And
yeah.
so we see my mom struggling.
I see your mom slowing down.
But I
Mhm.
feel like there's something else there.
It looks like she's receding alongside with your father.
It could be her getting weaker. There could be certain periods this year where she's more prone to illness or she's more sensitive to food, to medicine, to her environment.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
And then that may bring up more limitations for her in terms of her ability to continue to function and her drive. Both Saturn and Neptune can slow things down for people in different ways. And she's getting hit by both of them late spring through summer.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are certain planets where we feel more potential for loss. She's not getting hit by Pluto in the chart, which is a good sign. I think it might just be a matter of slowing down and potentially her experience being one of more limitation. And I don't know how she's done with all of this. I don't know if she's vulnerable to depression, but sometimes Saturn can push people in that direction of feeling burdened, feeling slowing down, not having the drive, the motivation.
I will say too that oftentimes when looking at the potential passing of an individual, that while we normally think of harder planets like Saturn or Pluto being impactful, oftentimes it's Jupiter or Neptune's. It depends on the circumstances, but in this sort of circumstance where it's old age and their physical body not being able to with withstand time any longer. That Jupiter and Neptune can be this release, this returning to source, and actually a good thing for the individual. And regardless of how much the family misses whoever's passing, that there is also a relief for the family member, whoever else is involved, because they know that they're in a better place. This upcoming year looks like you're going to be really grappling with these issues, and who knows what that actually means, but some heavy stuff, Amy.
Yeah.
Your mom in your natal chart looks like a fierce character to me. She looks strong. She's connected
Yeah.
with Mars. It looks like she has a lot of vitality.
Mhm.
So I wonder if this is not the year that starts to recede.
Uh-huh.
And if this is the year that your dad does pass, they're so connected in your natal chart. Oftentimes, people who are married for so long and they're so connected, the partner's vitality drops as part of
Mhm.
the loss of the other.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
which could be part of this picture as well.
Right. Yes.
I have to say one thing as we wrap up because unfortunately my ephemeris, Lisa, doesn't have Chiron in it. But
I
so you're
will.
coming up, Amy, on your Chiron return. Chiron is the wounded healer. And so during the Chiron return, it often brings up long-standing dynamics that go back to our early experience of how we got wired in. And so old things can come up. We can be triggered in certain ways, but it's literally like an excavation for the purpose of moving into the next phase of our life with something to offer. Chiron was the character that had the wounded Achilles heel. He tried to heal, but tried to search for all of the medicine, and all of that questing made him knowledgeable about all sorts of therapies and medicines. And then he went out into the world as the teacher. And so this whole period of life is about you like sorting out relationship, family story, your own identity, so that ultimately on the other side of this, you can emerge like more empowered. It will be part of your offering, part of the gift, part of how you move through the world. Actually, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, so it's exact February 15th. And let's see.
Wow. That's
Then,
is that Saturday? Isn't it?
yeah. You're feeling this right now. And
Yeah.
I think that this really fits in with where we started, as well as what we keep coming back to, which is like this Chiron return. It plunges us into ways that we feel isolated, just burdens that we've carried with us that maybe were given to us by other people in our lives that we've always carried with us, or something that we were born with that we can't quite ever fix. But part of the journey of working with Chiron wounds and Chiron in general helps us to be a better healer to other people. And I think that this is largely also what we've been speaking to with Pluto trine your moon and your natal Pluto, as well as Saturn stepping in and bringing more responsibility and reality. And also, what authority do you have? And I think Chiron is a beautiful part of this story. It's no wonder you're in this beautiful chapter of this is who Amy is. And these are my strengths. I think Chiron returns allow us to take what we've always referred to as our weaknesses and move them into our strength category. We have a much wider understanding of what that means to us in our life and how it's actually served us and helped us to help other people, which in your chart as well is very important to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the location of your Chiron, it does say something about really looking at those places in which you've labored and you haven't received adequate recognition or compensation. Or are there ways that, Lisa and I studied medieval astrology, so it gets kind of cryptic, but this is the house of slavery, which I guess in a modern sense is where do we give and give and give and aren't seen and compensated and adequately rewarded for. So that's all coming up for evaluation for you. And as you become more empowered, it does become your gift. You'll become a light for others and you'll give others permission to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks to
Thank
Amy.
you.
This has been really fun.
Thank you both very much.
As always, thanks for listening to Broadcast Astrology Insight for Humans. And if you're so inclined, like, follow, and subscribe, and please don't be a stranger.
Signing off for now. Until next time, humans, keep your gaze upwards on the stars and be well. We look forward to sharing more soon.